The Vanishing of Dorothy Arnold. On a cold December morning in 1910, a young woman stepped out of a brownstone on East 79th Street in Manhattan. She was 25 years old, educated, wealthy, and well-dressed. She was known in the old social circles of New York. She had money in her purse, a planned errand ahead of her, and every reason, at least from the outside, to return home by evening. Her name was Dorothy Harriet Camille Arnold. She told her mother she was going downtown to shop for an evening gown. Her younger sister's coming-out party was only a few days away, and Dorothy wanted something suitable for the occasion. Her mother offered to come with her. Dorothy said no. It was a small exchange, ordinary and domestic, the kind of moment that happens in a house and vanishes from memory almost instantly on a near-daily basis. But in this case, it became one of the last remembered moments of Dorothy Arnold's life. She left the family home at 108 East 79th Street and walked west toward Fifth Avenue. There was no sign of panic, no packed trunk, no known companion waiting outside, no note left behind. She simply walked into the city. And by the end of the day, she was gone. Not missing in some remote countryside, not lost at sea, not swallowed by wilderness or war, Dorothy Arnold vanished in the middle of Manhattan, New York, in daylight, among shop windows, carriages, streetcars, policemen, clerks, and crowds. She vanished from one of the busiest cities in the world. And more than a century later, no one knows where she went. Dorothy Arnold was born into a world of polished manners and heavy expectations. Her father, Francis Rose Arnold, was a prosperous importer of fine goods. The Arnold family lived comfortably on the Upper East Side, in the kind of household where reputation mattered almost as much as money. This was not simply because the family was wealthy. In the New York of 1910, society had a lot of rules. There were proper visits, proper clubs, proper dances, proper marriages, and proper silences. A private disgrace could become a public disaster. And Dorothy's family had reason to understand status. They were connected, established, and socially visible. Dorothy herself had been educated at Bryn Mawr, one of the most respected women's colleges in the country. She was intelligent, serious, and by many accounts, reserved. She was also trying to become a writer. Dorothy Arnold was not only a socialite passing through drawing rooms and dinner parties. She had ambitions of her own. She submitted stories to magazines. She wanted to be published. She wanted, in some way, to create a life that belonged to her. But success had not come easily. At least one of her stories had been rejected. According to later accounts, this rejection deeply embarrassed her, especially when it became known within the family. Her father, who seems to have had little patience for literary dreams, reportedly saw her writing as foolishness. In another era or in another household, this might have been a minor disappointment. But Dorothy lived inside a very narrow world. She was 25 years old, unmarried, dependent on her family, and expected to behave according to the rules of her class. To be a daughter in that house was to be watched. To be a woman in that society was to be interpreted. Every errand, letter, friendship, and mood could become evidence of character. And so when Dorothy left home on December 12, 1910, she was not stepping into a neutral city. She was stepping out of one kind of pressure and into another. New York in 1910 was already modern, but not yet the city we know today. Automobiles were appearing on the streets for the first time, but horses had not vanished. Electric lights glowed in shops and theaters, but old social customs still held power. Fifth Avenue was elegant, crowded, and changing quickly. The city was full of strangers. For someone like Dorothy Arnold, this could mean freedom. It could also mean danger. She left home sometime around late morning. She was dressed in a tailored blue serge suit and a matching skirt. She wore a black velvet hat, gloves, and carried a large muff, fashionable for the season. She was not dressed like someone trying to disappear into poverty or disguise herself completely. She looked, from all accounts, like the woman she was, a young member of New York society out for an afternoon of shopping. She had money with her, not an enormous amount, but enough for ordinary purchases. She walked down Fifth Avenue. Her first known stop was Park in Tilford, a well-known store where she bought a half-pound box of chocolate. This detail has survived because it's so ordinary. A box of chocolates, not a ticket out of the city, not a weapon, not a desperate last purchase. Just candy, charged or bought in the manner of a woman running errands before a family event. From there, Dorothy continued downtown. At Brentano's bookstore near 5th Avenue and 27th Street, she bought a book, Engaged Girl Sketches by Emily Calvin Blake. Again, the detail feels almost painfully normal. A young woman who loved books stopped at a bookstore and bought one. There was no sign that the clerks thought anything was wrong. No sign that Dorothy appeared frightened, confused, or hurried. Then, outside of Brentano's, she encountered a friend, Gladys King. This meeting is one of the last firm points in the entire case. Dorothy and Gladys spoke briefly. Dorothy seemed normal, cheerful even, depending on the account. She said she had been shopping, and she said she was going to walk through Central Park before going home. And then the two women parted. Dorothy Arnold walked away. After that, certainty ends. This is the strange power of the Dorothy Arnold case. There is no dramatic final scene, no scream heard in the alley, no blood-stained glove, no carriage driver later remembering a suspicious passenger, no letter found in a hotel room. This is simply a woman walking along 5th Avenue, and then absence. By evening, Dorothy had not returned home. This alone was alarming. The Arnolds were not a casual household. Dorothy was expected for dinner. She was expected to be present, visible, and accountable. At first, her family may have thought she was just delayed. Then they worried, and then they were frightened. But what they did next would shape the case forever. They didn't immediately go to the police. Instead, the family tried to handle the matter privately. The decision has often been treated as suspicious, and in some ways it was damaging. The first hours and days after a disappearance are vital. Witnesses forget, street memories dissolve, hotel clerks change shifts. A woman seen once in a crowd becomes impossible to distinguish later. But the Arnold family's decision also reflected the world they inhabited. For a wealthy family in 1910, police attention meant newspaper attention. Newspaper attention meant speculation. Speculation meant scandal. And scandal for a young unmarried woman could become a second disappearance. The disappearance of her reputation. The family hired private investigators. They checked hospitals, hotels, and steamship lists. They made inquiries quietly. They searched without making Dorothy's disappearance public. They also gave explanations to outsiders. When friends called for Dorothy, the family reportedly said she was ill or had a headache or was resting. Days passed, then weeks. The story grew more impossible to contain. Finally, in January of 1911, about 6 weeks after Dorothy vanished, the family finally went to the police. By then, the city had already swallowed the trail. Once the press learned of the disappearance, Dorothy Arnold became a national mystery. Newspapers loved the story because it contained every element that sold papers in 1911. A beautiful young heiress, a wealthy family, a disappearance in broad daylight, hints of romance, hints of rebellion, hints of suicide, hints of a scandal. And above all else, silence, because the less anyone knew, the more they could imagine. The simplest theory was that Dorothy had left voluntarily. Perhaps she had grown tired of her family's control. Perhaps she was humiliated by her failed writing ambitions. Perhaps she wanted to begin again somewhere else under another name. The idea was not far-fetched. Back then you could disappear. She was an adult. She had some money. She was educated. She lived in a city connected by trains, ships, and boarding houses. A determined person could vanish, at least for a time. But there are problems with the theory. Dorothy did not take much money. She did not appear to take extra clothing. She left behind jewelry and personal belongings. She did not contact friends in any confirmed way. No bank trail or long-term sighting ever established a new life. To disappear voluntarily forever requires planning, discipline, and, really, luck. It is possible, but the evidence is thin. Another theory was suicide. This was taken seriously at the time, partly because of Dorothy's literary disappointment and partly because disappearance cases often turned toward the assumption of self-destruction when no other explanation appeared. Central Park was mentioned because Dorothy reportedly said she planned to walk there. But no body was found, no note was found, no confirmed witnesses saw her enter the park or approach water. The park was searched and the city looked for remains. Nothing emerged. It is possible that Dorothy died by suicide in a way that concealed her body, but again, there is no firm evidence. Then there was the theory of abduction or murder. This is the version that makes the case feel most frightening. A woman leaves a bookstore in broad daylight. She walks into the movement of the city. Somewhere between one block and the next, someone intercepts her. But Manhattan in the middle of the day was not empty. Fifth Avenue was busy. Dorothy was well-dressed and recognizable to people in her social circle. A visible attack in broad daylight that took her off the street should have caused some sort of disturbance. Unless, of course, she went willingly with someone she knew. That possibility has always hovered over the case. Dorothy may have met someone by arrangement. She may have expected a conversation, a ride, a private meeting, or a plan unknown to her family. One man's name became attached to the mystery more than any other: George Griscom Jr. Griscom was an older man from a prominent family in Pittsburgh. Dorothy had known him, and there were suggestions of romantic feeling, at least on one side. Her family didn't approve of him as a suitor. After Dorothy vanished, her family investigated him. He was in Europe at the time, which made the matter more dramatic. Dorothy's relatives traveled abroad and confronted him. But no solid evidence proved that Griscom knew where Dorothy was. He denied knowledge of her disappearance. The family looked, detectives looked, and rumors followed. Still, Dorothy wasn't found. As the months passed, rumors grew darker. Some claimed Dorothy had died after an illegal medical procedure. Others claimed she had entered a hospital under another name. There were stories of sanitariums, secret births, hidden deaths, and family cover-ups. Many of these stories fed on the anxieties of the time. In 1910, a young unmarried woman's sexuality was treated not only as private, but as socially explosive. A rumor did not have to be proven to ruin a woman. It only had to circulate. So Dorothy Arnold became, in the public imagination, not just a missing person, but a blank screen for every fear polite society had about its daughters. Had she run away with a man? Had she been pregnant? Had she been betrayed? Had she killed herself? Had the family hidden the truth? Or had something brutal happened? A chance encounter, a crime, a body concealed before anyone knew to look? The tragedy is that almost every theory explains something, and none explains enough. The family's behavior remains one of the most controversial parts of the case. To modern people, waiting 6 weeks to report a disappearance of your daughter seems incomprehensible, and it is. If a daughter vanished today after a shopping trip, most families would call the police within hours. But the Arnold family belonged to another age. Their instinct was not appeal, it was containment. They feared scandal, they feared headlines, and they feared what people would think about them, what they would say about them, and all the rest of it. And because of that fear, they may have destroyed their best chance of finding her. By the time the police became involved, the witnesses who might have remembered Dorothy had lived another 6 weeks of ordinary life. Clerks had served thousands of customers, drivers had carried hundreds of passengers, hotel registers had filled with names. Any person who might have seen Dorothy after she left Brentano's had little reason, at the time, to preserve the memory. The city had moved on before it knew it was holding a mystery. Now's the time where a lot of people would likely want to make the family into villains. But that would be too easy. Yeah, their delay was damaging and perhaps disastrous. Yet it was also human and kind of normal for that social class back then. They were terrified, proud, and kind of constrained by their class, desperate to believe the problem could be solved quietly before the world learned of it. They may have imagined Dorothy alive somewhere, embarrassed, impulsive, waiting to come home. And perhaps they believed that publicity would harm her more than help her. This is one of the cruelest parts of the case. The Arnold family may have thought they were protecting Dorothy. Instead, they helped erase her trail. As the years passed, false leads continued. People claimed to have seen Dorothy in other cities. Some said she was in Europe. Others claimed she was living quietly under another name. Letters arrived. Tips came in. Sightings were investigated and dismissed. The case became famous enough that it began to detach from Dorothy herself. She became the missing heiress, the girl who never came back, the woman who vanished on Fifth Avenue. The real Dorothy, the daughter, sister, reader, aspiring writer, and young woman living inside a difficult household, was gradually replaced by the legend of her disappearance. And that's what remains in old mysteries. The person becomes a symbol. But Dorothy Arnold was not a symbol on December 12, 1910. She was a woman walking through New York. She had probably crossed Fifth Avenue many times before. She knew the rhythm of the city, the shop doors opening and closing, the sound of wheels on pavement, the cold air moving between buildings, the polite exchanges with clerks, the small comforts of books and chocolate. She may have been happy that day. She may have been anxious. She may have been planning something. Or she may have been planning nothing at all and just kind of enjoying herself. The most unsettling possibility is that Dorothy's disappearance has no grand design behind it. There was no secret escape or elaborate conspiracy, no scary Gothic family plot, just a bizarre moment perhaps. A meeting, a decision, maybe a wrong turn, possibly a private vulnerability that no one around her understood until it was too late. That's why the case stays with us. Not because it's the most violent mystery, not because of scary suspects, but because it happened in daylight, in a very busy city in public, in a place that should have made disappearance kind of impossible. A woman left home, bought chocolates, bought a book, spoke to a friend, and said she was going for a walk. Then she became absence. There is an eerie contrast at the center of the story. Dorothy Arnold belonged to a family that prized appearances. Her world was built on visibility, being seen at right events by the right people in the right colors and saying the right things. Yet she vanished more completely than almost anyone of her time. The newspapers couldn't bring her back. The detectives could not bring her back. The family's money could not bring her back. Even the city, with all the witnesses and noise and records, could not explain what happened to her. In the end, the Dorothy Arnold case is not only a mystery about where one woman went, it is a story about silence. The silence of a family afraid of scandal. The silence of a city that saw too much to remember anything. The silence around women's private lives in an age where reputation could matter more than truth. And finally, the silence Dorothy herself left behind. There was no farewell or confession, there was no body, there was no answer. Only a path through Manhattan that can be traced for a few hours and then no farther. From East 79th Street to Fifth Avenue. From Park and Tilford to Brentano's. From a conversation outside a bookstore to a promised walk through Central Park. And then, nothing. Dorothy Arnold disappeared on December 12, 1910. She was 25 years old. She's never been found. And more than a century later, people still try to follow her last known steps through New York, hoping to, intuit something, feel something, see something perhaps. But we can't. The city she walked through is gone. The shops are gone. The witnesses are gone. Her family is gone. Even the scandal they feared has faded into history, because it was never important. She was. What remains is the image of a young woman in winter clothes, carrying chocolates and a book, walking into the afternoon. For a moment, she's still there, visible among the crowds. And then, as if New York itself opened and closed around her, Dorothy Arnold is gone.